All right, join me now. He's a senior NFL reporter for ESPN, does an amazing job year-round. It is the great Jeremy Fowler. Jeremy, I see you at ESPN right now. Thanks for making some time during your busy schedule.
Of course, Ari, I appreciate it. Had to do a light flex here with the New York background on the water. This is not my house.
It's beautiful there. I was there once when I came over, and it's a gorgeous place over there. So yeah, we're 7 weeks away from the season starting, which is, I mean, it's really getting closer. Training camps are opening up slowly but surely around the NFL, and you've been doing something very interesting every year for the last few years, and it's one of my favorite reads every summer. You survey over 50 league executives, coaches, and scouts to get the top 10 players at each position. And it's not just rankings and that's it. Like, you have the reasoning, you put quotes in there, you have good nuggets, some really good information as well. Explains everything. All of it is on ESPN.com. People should really check it out. I want to hit on some of the results and get into how the league
Yeah.
thinks about certain players. I don't think we'll be able to get to all the positions, but let's start at the quarterback position and we'll move down the line. Let me start off at the top. You have Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. They're number 1 and 2 respectively.
Yep.
I've been asking this question to some people, and I want to see how the league thinks. Were there any concerns going into this year for Aaron without Devontae and Patrick without Tyreek Hill, or is it those two guys are the best? Doesn't make a difference for them?
Certainly, I think there's some concern, and supporting cast is part of the criteria, right? Because that's how you set up a quarterback for success. But I think for the most part, because their body of work is so large and they've been such impressive playmakers, that people are willing to bet on them as sort of singular talents, meaning, they're sort of scheme transcendent. You can put them in any offense, and that's a guy you can say go win the ball with your arm, and really there are only a few like that in the world. And so yeah, they certainly help their cases that way, where like a guy like Joe Burrow, who ranked really highly, number 5.
Yeah.
You still kind of have to acknowledge, well, young player, he's got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, like that certainly helps a young quarterback. He might need that, where these guys, like, they can really make just about anything work. Now, are they better with Tyreek and Devontae? Certainly, but they stand on their own.
So, it obviously makes a lot of sense. Those two guys are former NFL MVPs, Rodgers back to back. But when you're looking at your list, you mentioned Joe Burrow as a number 5, Dak Prescott's a number 10, Russell Wilson makes the top 10. There is a former MVP in there who did not make the top 10, and this caused
Yeah.
major stir all over the place,
Yep.
and that is Lamar Jackson. More than half the voters you polled did not have him in the top 10. My thinking was because Lamar's style might not be for everyone, but you can't deny the talent. What happened over there that he does not make the list?
Yeah, I knew it was going to create waves when I saw the votes coming in. He just wasn't getting enough of them. He
Yeah.
was off a lot of top 10 ballots. There are a couple levels here, but one of them is that a lot of evaluators think that he lacks poise in the pocket. I think that's the best way I can say it. You saw that late in the year with the blitz, with teams like Miami, Cincinnati blitzing him. He had some trouble. And nobody denies that he's a dynamic playmaker, and he's a very, very high level quarterback whose record speaks for itself. 37-12 as a starter, MVP. I think a lot of these people value pocket presence over just about anything else with the quarterback position, just because they're thinking long term. For a few, like long term, that's what's going to get you over the top and win you a Super Bowl. Where other styles might come and go, or you might have success with it for 3 years, 5 years, even 8 years, but over time it catches up to you. So that's how they look at it as far as like picking a quarterback to build a team around.
Kyler Murray is another one who didn't make the top 10, and he has a bit of a similar style where he
Yeah.
runs around, moves around. When you ask people around the league about Kyler and Lamar, both these guys are eligible to get a new deal. Do you feel like front offices are okay going to that $40+ million a year with hefty guarantees for those guys?
I think it would depend on the team. Some certainly would, because there are enough people who look at a guy like Lamar Jackson as a high level top 7 quarterback. And really, the last 2 years, he ranked highly in the top 10. But you had the emergence of Burrow and Justin Herbert and Deshaun Watson. We did put in the rankings this year because he should play at some point. So that knocked those guys back a little bit. Kyler was 10 last year. So, really the voting was 13 guys, and Kyler was 13. Kirk Cousins got 1 vote, but that was it. So it's a clear it's a clear line there as far as the pantheon of quarterbacks. There's the 13 and there's the rest. That's just how it is. So if you have one of the 13, you need to pay them, right? But I do think the holdup with teams like Baltimore and to a lesser extent Arizona is, are you comfortable getting to a number commensurate with their skill set and ability? That number is insanely high, so teams have a hard time coming to grips with that, but eventually they'll probably come around to the fact that they have to pay it.
Yep, and Kyler and Lamar are two guys who everyone is watching here if they do get new deals in the coming weeks before training camp. I want to shift over to the running backs. Derrick Henry is back at number one, second straight year for him on this list, followed by Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb. Saquon Barkley ends up outside the top 10. This is somebody who was number one a couple years ago on this list. Obviously, injuries have played a major factor, but some of the quotes in that article are a bit rough on him. Is there still a belief that Saquon could be the guy like he once showed he could be as number 2 overall pick?
Well, it's funny. Yes, the short answer is yes. But it's, it largely depends on how he comes back from those injuries, because people still believe in the ability and the talent. If you're making an excuse for him, it's that coming off that injury, maybe he was hesitant. And so he wasn't really willing to get in there and get those tough yards. But he got the number 1 position 2 years ago because teams are enamored with the big play threat. They want to be able to have a guy who can break it 80 yards at any time. And that was him coming out of college and to a lesser extent early in his career. And when he lost that, then it's like, well, what else are you getting? You're not really getting a complete back. Where other guys like a Javonte Williams, a young guy, or Najee Harris, they're doing more for you at a younger age. So that's really the turning point. If he can get back some of his explosiveness, then there's no reason why he can't make it back in the top 10. You see Christian McCaffrey, who's somewhat of a similar high-level talent, at least high pick. He's still in there despite his injuries.
Yeah, but one of the complaints in the Saquon Barkley piece was that he's always looking for the big play run instead of just taking what is there for him. You mentioned the rookies who are in there. Actually, two rookie running backs made it with Javonte Williams and Najee Harris in Pittsburgh. I just want to ask you a general question about running backs, because there's a lot of praise going on for the top 10 guys in the piece, but front offices, when it comes to paying the running back position top end money, where do you see, how is their thinking, I guess, when it comes to that?
Well, the thinking is they don't want to do it. I mean, it's a position that just hasn't risen to the level of others. Tight end's really the only other comparable position right now. It's kind of stuck at that $15 million range with George Kittle. Now, TJ Hawkinson's sort of the next guy I have earmarked to get a bigger payday, and I think he'll surpass that. But the running backs, there's no clear-cut strategy to get them there. Like, I've talked to prominent sports agents that have all but stopped recruiting running backs, because it's just a hard position to get a second contract on. It's good for guys like James Conner, a few others in free agency that did pretty well. Leonard Fournette did pretty well, all things considered, I think. And so Jonathan Taylor is the big one that everybody sort of has earmarked. He has another year like he did in year 2. He's going to be hard to ignore because he's going to be 1 year away from free agency. Those day 2 picks can get paid a year earlier than the first round picks, and the Colts have a standard for paying their own players. They believe in the homegrown formula, so that's one. If anything is going to resuscitate that market, it's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, but he becomes eligible for an extension next year at this time, and as I said, he came in number 2 on this list. Let me go to a position that their market exploded this offseason. That is the wide receiver position. I feel like it might have been the most difficult one to do because everyone throws around top 10 for a bunch of guys, but when actually sitting down and putting together a top 10, it's pretty hard. Let me go over to number 9. You have Deebo Samuel coming in there at number 9. I was curious to ask you, how does the league view him? Because he was used in such a unique way last year, and it worked so well for Kyle Shanahan. But are people in the league looking at him as a true number 1 wide receiver?
Not really. That's not such a bad thing. They just look at him as a weapon. I think if there was a hybrid category I could have done, I would have done it, and he would have been number 1. There just aren't enough guys like that at his level. And so that's the rub is if you're somebody who prefers a true route runner like a Keenan Allen or a Stephon Diggs, or hey, I'm going to beat you one-on-one with this route tree, you're not going to be high on Debo necessarily, but nobody voting denied that if you're talking about generators of points and offense, there's not many better. And so that's why he deserved a place, but kind of limped into the top 10. He didn't get a lot of votes, but it was enough to justify the year that he had.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what had to happen. But it's interesting. I talked to one scout who said, like, he can run routes. It's just that all his life he was asked to just take the ball and run with it, or let's get him the ball and go, because he's so good with it. And maybe that worked out to his detriment a little bit as far as a refined, nuanced route runner, but that's not really his fault. He's just a great player with the ball, so they get it to him. Kind of like Tyreek a little bit, who's come a long way as a route runner, by the way. Like he's now an elite guy in that area. Maybe wasn't that when he first came in. So, that's sort of the difference.
Yep, and Tyreek came in at number 4. While we're talking about Debo, the drama that was there earlier this offseason appears to have calmed down. Are we expecting something to eventually get done there in San Francisco?
So I can say that the 49ers you're putting forth good efforts, right? Like GM John Lynch has been engaged in this, which is a good sign. It's not like the sides aren't talking or there's some massive stalemate. I would be surprised if he took the practice field without a new deal come training camp. He might report, who knows? He might not, but if he reports, I would be surprised if he doesn't hold in, go and just show up and say, I can't take the field. And that would even create a little more urgency to get done. The 49ers want to do it. And, that's the stage would be set for him to do so. I would expect him to get done before DK Metcalf. We'll see. But both those guys, I do think something will be worked out. I don't necessarily think it will get ugly at this point. My sense after asking around is, Debo's at a point where, and I certainly can't speak for him, but like San Fran knows how to use him better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I do think they'll end up paying him with that acknowledgement, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I think the player recognizes that too.
Yep. And Debo and DK came in 9 and 10. Debo and DK also have the same agent. Both of them are looking for big money extensions. Going back to the receivers list here, there are so many great young receivers, like I mentioned, in this league. Jamar Chase came in at number 3. Justin Jefferson came in at number 4. Are there any receivers who didn't crack the top 10, but got a lot of praise, and you could see them cracking the top 10 come this time next year?
Well, Keenan Allen was the obvious omission, but he's a little different because he's now in his 30s and is considered an aging player. He's still great. But that one was surprising. I basically had a tiebreaker between him and DK Metcalf. And I don't have the list in front of me, but who was right behind him? Do you have it? Terry McLaurin will make a push. I mean, he's really good.
Deontay Johnson is on there.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have it in front of me, but there's an honorable mention there that I think will be
Deontay Johnson.
AJ Brown. Brown. I mean, he was on there last year. He didn't quite make it, but he's really, really good. So like AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin. CeeDee Lamb. That's one I think. The votes that he did get, like the people who voted for him were saying like he's going to be that guy by the end of the year that you're saying, okay, I get it now. Like they said he maybe underachieves a little bit as far as like, is he engaged every snap to go, get it done and be that sort of 10 to 12 catch a game guy? But like the ability is clearly there. And the feeling is when he turns it on, he really turns it on.
Yep, and a big opportunity there this year now that Amari Cooper is in Cleveland. Let me flip over to the defensive side and look at the corners because Jalen Ramsey is back at number 1 for the second straight year. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb. In Dallas, they also have Trevon Diggs, same draft class. He comes in at number 10 after an 11 interception season. But you wrote that he was the toughest evaluation of that group. Why was that?
Because he was kind of labeled a clear boom or bust player. Like he's great with the interceptions. We all saw the numbers last year. But what he gave up is significant, depending on the metrics. I've seen a few out there. I know PFF has theirs, and like we have some in-house stuff as far as like what you did as the nearest defender. And he gave up a good bit. I don't know the exact numbers on me. I think the feeling was like he takes chances that are unnecessary. and then you're sort of, potentially losing the game as a result. Where, and it's tough. This is what's tough with what I do with this project is you want to get coaches involved. Coaches are different than like personnel guys or scouts, because coaches see like, hey, I want somebody who's going to be steady and not cost us the game and get us beat, right? Where a personnel guy might say, well, look, his ball skills, I want ball skills. He's so great at that. That's all I want. So you get different perspectives. So, the fact that Tre'Davious White's not on the list is like criminal, right? I mean, he's
Yeah.
so good, but I think the injury hurt him a little bit in the voting, even though he should be fine this year. And so it was just two very different players. One's like a technician who's never going to cost you the game. One's going to win you and cost you the game. So, and that's hyperbole, but like, you know what I mean? Like he's
Yeah.
boomer bust is sort of the phrase that was used a few times in the voting.
Yep, and it's true because like the interception numbers are there. When looking deeper into it, the exact quote in the article was, "I love his instincts, but the cost is giving up a bunch of big plays."
Yeah.
I don't love the interceptions if that is the case. I want to shift over quickly to safeties in the last few minutes that we have here. Jesse Bates came in at number 6, and this guy is ultra talented, and he's just as important as a leader and in that locker room in Cincinnati. Why do they not pay him here if the franchise tag deadline now passed? And is the holdout element also legit over there?
Well, yes, the holdout element is legitimate because he can't be fined because he hasn't signed his tag. So I think he's going to milk this out a little bit, at least miss some camp time. That's my expectation. I know the Bengals loosely expect that. There's no word for sure, but I would be surprised if he showed up day one ready to go. The time to do it was last year when the market was more manageable. The market was at the top 15 million for safeties. Now it's 18 plus. So it just becomes harder to do. And when you wait a year, then the player's less eager to just take what you were offering before. So it's a confluence of bad timing and a team that is pretty conservative with their guarantees. Certain teams like that, Steelers to an extent, the Bengals, the Packers, like they'll pay you a high number, but the guarantees are going to be pretty low. And so I think the player, I'm guessing, had a problem with that. And we'll see. I know there's some buzz out there right now about trade destinations or trade partners, but
yes,
I don't necessarily think so. I would be surprised because the time to do that was before. And I think that talking to people involved, I think the player would be fairly surprised too, just because like the Bengals hadn't showed a willingness to trade him and the tag deadline is up. So if you trade for him, you're inheriting the 1 year on the tag. And then he has like crazy leverage next year on you, and you gave up a first or second round pick for him. So I'd be hard pressed to see a team doing that.
Yeah, it also just feel odd for the Bengals to do that after the year they just had with that team, losing the defensive leader. Somebody, a lot of those players have come out and vocalized about how important he is for that locker room, including Joe Burrow. The last one I want to hit on here is the edge rushers. And you have Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, 1 and 2. TJ's 1, Myles is 2. Nick and Joey Bosa come in at 3 and 4. You left a note at the very end of Nick Bosa's rankings, which I think was interesting, that he could be looking to join Aaron Donald in the 30 million a year club. Do you think that's something we might see there? Because I'm sure he is pushing for it, but do you think we'll actually end up seeing that possibly coming to fruition?
Yes, he's just a guy you have to pay. Like he's really, really good. Like in the voting, he was a clear number 3. Like it wasn't close. So you had Watt and Garrett in their own class, Nick Bosa in his own class, well above his brother. Now this is an unscientific process, right? But I thought that was telling. And he was high 2 years ago as a rookie, or coming up his rookie year. So he's just that kind of guy you pay, right? Like it's more about the mathematics of San Francisco's situation. They could hold it up because they got Garoppolo on their books for, and we don't know when he's going to be cleared exactly on the shoulder surgery, although things are going well. And you would have to, with a trade partner, find a new deal because they're not going to pay him $24 million next year. And the list of suitors is small. So there's no slam dunk that he gets traded here tomorrow, right? And then you got to handle Debo too. You got to deal with his contract. So there's some moving parts that could hold it up. But it's, out of those 3 players, I mean, he's probably the guy you prioritize because you just don't get guys like that very often. And the money's only going to go up. he's got 2 years left on his rookie deal, so that helps you spread it out a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of business is going to be going down there in San Francisco and really around the league here in the
Yeah.
coming weeks as training camp opens. You mentioned Debo, you mentioned Nick Bosa, you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo as well. Another thing that we are all waiting on. All right, Jeremy, I
Yeah.
want to thank you for coming on. Everyone can go and check out the full rankings with detailed explanation at ESPN.com or go to Jeremy's Twitter account, JFowlerESPN, and you can find all the links over there. Jeremy, this was great. Best of luck as training camps open up around the league. I'm sure I'll be going around to some camps, and hopefully we could do this again down the line here in the future.
Yeah. All right, my guy. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.